Welcome to a video tutorial on Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms and the emerging principles of the Hemingway Code. You can see this picture here of Ernest Hemingway and his son Jack Hemingway at Silver Creek with their shotguns after a day of hunting ducks. But this lecture is primarily focused on the sort of 5 principles of the code that emerge in Farewell to Arms, and I'll give you some passages from some characters, a character who does not exhibit a code principle and a character who does, with the goal in mind of preparing you to write a compare and contrast, mini little essay that develops a coded character and the moment that shows how they follow a code principle, and then an uncoded character and the principle that's violated, and a compare and contrast between them. That'll give you a good little window into how Hemingway, through In Our Time, Sun Also Rises, and Farewell to Arms, was developing the principles of the code that really come to fruition in the final 2 novels, of course, For Whom the Bell Tolls in 1940, and then in The Old Man and the Sea in 1954. But it's important here, I like this image of Hemingway and his son because it shows that, it reminds me of that one quote where he wrote that, a man's legacy is what he gives to others, and it takes a lifetime of learning. And so one of the things we need to talk about is that, Hemingway wanted to run order through chaos. He found 20th century to be disorienting, he was disillusioned with war, kept returning to it to find another context in which war would prove to be a noble exercise, an exercise in which one could exert the will and gain some pride and dignity from being effective at war. But he wanted to run order through chaos, and in the great phrase, so that a man can be destroyed emotionally or destroyed psychologically or destroyed physically, but not defeated as a person, not defeated as a self. And so here are the code principles that emerge in A Farewell to Arms. Speaking through actions. You'll recall that Hemingway not only was terse in his prose, but he was terse in his conversation. So one should not be windy and messy and flamboyant and boastful in one's speech to convey that you follow a code. You are what you do, not what you say you do or have done. So really, your actions speak much more profoundly than anything you can say about what you have done or what you will do. Completing tasks well, sort of the central tenet. Maintain discipline and honor in the means by which you complete tasks. Strive for noble ends and finish what you start. Clearly, not all tasks can be completed well, but the process and giving yourself over to doing things well in the hopes of achieving a positive end, really important to the Hemingway Code. Being faithful to and in love. It's a little cut off there, but take risks in love as an antidote to despair and maintain fidelity in love. Even though Hemingway in his life had 4 marriages, he was always in love, as he said, and never really in his life was without a woman. And he lived by that code of taking risks as an antidote to despair. I'm not so sure he maintained fidelity in love, but certainly his characters do in his novels. Developing experiential knowledge and valuing experiential knowledge or intuitive knowledge over tuitions or things that can be learned or received from being taught. Be skeptical of any knowledge divorced from experience and admire those who are expert from experience. So one of the things we see in Farewell to Arms is Frederick Henry surrounding himself with people who are more experienced with faith, like the priest has faith in God, has faith in the self, has faith in the world, and Frederick doesn't. And so he surrounds himself with those who he admires, and he wants to know how the experiences of the priest led him to such a faith. And the same thing with Count Greffy, one who doesn't long for an afterlife, doesn't believe in an afterlife, believes he lived a complete life, a full life, and has no regrets, and believes passionately in love as a sustaining force. So those are 2 great mentors for him who have great experiential knowledge, both in faith in God and faith in love. The latter becoming the one that Frederick Henry strives to have. We never get the sense that Frederick Henry becomes devout in his faith in God. And then valuing solidarity, developing and maintaining faith in others who embody and exhibit the other principles of the code. There are many characters he surrounds himself with, like Rinaldi, his Catherine Barclay, who he falls in love with. These are individuals who have great experiential knowledge, who've developed a disillusionment with war, who only believe that the self can be ennobled by completing tasks well, valuing the people who follow the code. Here's a little chart I think is helpful to get us thinking about coded characters and codeless characters. On the left-hand side, you can see that Frederick Henry emerges as a coded character in removing himself from the war when he couldn't complete tasks well. Catherine Barclay, even in the moments of her death, has a stoic endurance and faith and love to sustain her up until the end. The priest and his devoutness to God and to serving others. Count Greffing, his love for life and his belief in love as a sustaining force. Dr. Rinaldi and his ability to be a great surgeon. Dr. Valentini, also a great surgeon, complete tasks well, and they gain confidence from that. But they also have a sort of acerbic disillusionment with abstractions or false boasting, and they also see through the futility of war. On the right-hand side, and the other one that's cut off here is the peasants. There's peasant wisdom in this book that you know from the previous video tutorial, because they're destroyed from the start. They never had a belief that they were going to rise up to another class, and so they knew from the beginning that they would be pawns of society and be conscribed into the war, but whatever they do well because they know that's all the pride that they can develop. On the right-hand side, you get the sergeants who leave Fred when their truck is stuck in the retreat from Caporetto, and he shoots one of them. They don't value solidarity. They don't complete tasks well. The officers of the firing squad are all about abstractions. They don't have any real experience with war, and they don't know what the soldiers were going through in the retreat, and they presume that the Italian soldiers are actually German soldiers dressed in Italian uniform, and they are very much caught up in abstractions and not in reality. Ettore is a braggart. He speaks too much and boasts too much about his great experiences at war. Dr. Verini is unsure of himself, doesn't complete tasks well, doesn't want to complete an operation without the help of a couple other secondary opinions from doctors. And then all the Italian officers who visit the whorehouse of Villa Rosa show that they are really broken and don't have a faith in love as a sustaining force, only in physical gratification. And I want to look at just two passages that will help you. Ultimately, you're going to choose your own character in your own moment and develop an analysis paragraph that shows how that moment exhibits the code principle, and then another one which shows a moment in a character that shows how a code principle is not followed. But let's begin with Ettore, who is a character in the book. He only appears briefly, but he's there really to show how a code principle is broken. And so they're talking about, this is post-war, Frederick's been injured, and Ettore is talking about how being wounded at war is even better than the medals. He speaks too much. He doesn't speak through actions. He speaks about his incredible actions, and he seems to get more pleasure out of that than actually doing anything well. He says this: "I hear you're going to get the silver medal," to Fred. "What kind of citation are you going to get?" "I don't know," said Fred. I don't know if I'm going to get it." "You're going to get it. Oh boy, the girls at Kova will think you're fine then." So again, not doing things for the right reasons, doing things for the admiration from others. "They'll think you killed 200 Austrians or captured a whole trench by yourself. Believe me, I got to work for my decorations." "How many have you got, Ettore?" "He's got everything," Simmons said. "He's the boy they're running the war for." Obviously very sarcastic tone. "I've got the bronze twice and 3 silver medals," said Ettore, but only on pages of one have come through." "What's the matter with the others?" "The action wasn't successful," said Ettore. "When the action isn't successful, they hold up all the medals." "How many times have you been wounded, Ettore?" 3 times bad. I got 3 wound stripes. See?" And he pulled his sleeves around the stripe. were parallel, silver lines on a black background sewed to the cloth of the sleeve about 8 inches below the shoulder. You got one too, Ettore said to Fred. Believe me, they're fine to have. I'd rather have them than metal. So again, all right, because you've got these wounds you can show others, and you can gain their admiration, right? So not completing tasks, not speaking through actions, but doing it for the admiration from others. Believe me, boy, when you get 3, you've got something. You only got 1 for a wound that puts you 3 months in a hospital. Where were you wounded, Ettore? Ettore pulled up his sleeve. Here. He showed the deep, smooth red scar. Here on my leg. I can't show you that because I got pooties on, and in the foot, those are knickers. They're dead. There's dead bone in my foot that stinks right now. Every morning I take little pieces out of it and it stinks all the time. What hit you? A hand grenade, one of those potato mashers. Just blew the whole side off my foot off. You know those potato mashers? He turned to me. Sure. I saw the son of a bitch throw it. Knocked me down. I thought I was dead all right, but those damn potato mashers haven't got anything in them. I shot the son of a bitch with my rifle. I always carry a rifle, so they can't tell I'm an officer. How did he look? That was the only one he had, Ettore said. I don't know why he threw it. He ignores the question. I guess he always wanted to throw one. He never saw any real fighting, probably. I shot the son of a bitch all right. Again, bragging about his heroism. How did he look when you shot him? Simmons asks again. Oh, if I should know. Shot him in the belly. I was afraid I was afraid I'd miss if I shot him in the head. So here's Hemingway's very subtle way of saying, like, look, this guy belly shoots a guy because he doesn't have confidence in his shot. He causes this painful, prolonged death where he bleeds out in the intestines and the guts. And here's Ettore bragging about that. So not only is his action not noble, he's bragging about the nobility of it. Here is a violation of the code of not speaking through actions, but speaking boastfully about what has come to be, as we've decided here, an action that isn't worth bragging about. Let's take a look at a character that it's a code principle. This is Count Greffy. This is the 90-year-old man that Frederick Henry plays pool with toward the end of the novel in the hotel before Catherine and Fred escape to Switzerland, and they're talking about death. They're talking about afterlife. They're talking about how to live well, and Count Greffy says this: I don't know about the soul. Poor boy, we none of us know about the soul. Are you crying? At night. So let me back up. So I don't know about the soul. That's Fred, and then Count Greffy says, poor boy, we none of us know about the soul. Are you crying? Which means, are you faithful? And Fred says, at night, on page 279. Count Greffy smiled and turned the glass with his fingers. I'd expect to become more devout, that is, more faithful, right, as I grow older, but sometimes I haven't. But somehow I haven't. It's a great pity. Would you like to live after death? I asked, and instantly felt a fool to mention death. 90-year-old man, right? But he did not mind the word. It would depend on the life, says Count Greffy. This life is very pleasant. I would like to live forever. I very nearly have. We were sitting in deep leather chairs, a champagne in the ice bucket, and our glasses on the table between us. If you ever live to be as old as I am, you'll find many strange things. You never seem old. It's the body that is old. Sometimes I'm afraid I'll break off a finger as one breaks a stick of chalk, and the spirit is no older and not much wiser. You are wise, said Fred. No, that is a great fallacy, the wisdom of old men. They do not grow wise, they grow careful. Perhaps that is wisdom. It's a very unattractive wisdom, says the Count. What do you value most? Someone I love. With me it is the same. That is not wisdom. Do you value life? Yes. So do I, because it's all I have. And to give birthday parties, he laughed. You're probably wiser than I am. You do not give birthday parties. We both drank the wine. What do you think of the war, really? I asked. I think it's stupid, said the Count. Who will win it? Italy. Why? They're a younger nation. Do younger nations always win wars? They're apt to for a time. Then what happens? They become older nations. You said you were not wise. Dear boy, that is not wisdom, that is cynicism. It sounds very wise to me. It's not particularly. I could quote you the examples on the other side, but it's not bad. Have we finished the champagne? Almost. Should we drink some more? And I must dress. Perhaps we'd better not now. You sure you don't want more? Yes, and he stood up. I'll this is the count. I hope you will be very fortunate and very happy and very, very healthy so you can live a long life. Thank you, said Fred, and I hope you will live forever. Thank you, I have. And if you ever become devout, pray for me if I'm dead. I'm asking several of my friends to do that. I've expected to become devout myself, but it has not come. I thought he smiled sadly, but I could not tell. He was so old and his face was very wrinkled, so his smile used so many lines that all gradations were lost. I might become very devout, I said. Anyway, I will pray for you. I'd always expected to become devout. All my family died very devout, but somehow it did not come. It's too early. Maybe it's too late. Perhaps I've outlived my religious feeling. My own comes at night, Fred says again. Right, when he's lonely, when he's not without Catherine, he develops this desire for a faith in God. Then, too, you are in love. Do not forget that it is a religious feeling. You believe so? Of course. He took a step toward the table. You are very kind to play. It was a great pleasure. We will walk upstairs together. So this is a great moment for Fred, again, surrounding himself with mentors, someone who has faith in love, faith in life, faith in the will to complete tasks well, to develop experiential knowledge, to get strong in the broken places. All of these things work toward Count Greffy's belief that life can't get any better than the life that he has lived, and he wishes he could go on living forever and doesn't need an afterlife to believe in, to long for, even in the last moments of his life as a 90-year-old. And so here we have an individual who, for Frederick, is a mentor, is a coded character about love as a religious feeling, and he echoes what the priest said about love, that when you wish to serve, you wish to sacrifice for, then you are in love. And so there's confirmation that these two older mentors have exhibit and believe deeply in that code principle of being faithful to and in love. I want to walk through some of the important criticism of Farewell to Arms before we get to the writing assignment, where you'll develop your own coded moment and uncoded moment. Let's look at the biological trap from Ray West. For Ray West, he says that the individual code that Hemingway develops through his characters in his novels is a search for ethical standards that seemed impossible in war. So he wants to create a context for his life outside of war that will guide him, that will allow him to have faith in his own behavior and his own ability to do things well and become enfranchised by that, become ennobled by doing things well. So defeat and destruction. There's a difference, as we find out in The Old Man and the Sea, that a man can be destroyed but not defeated. And Ray West comments and says there's a need to be outwardly but not inwardly defeated. There's a need to hold on to the code and the self to avoid complete and utter defeat. For the Hemingway hero is defined in this essay that Frederick is caught between tradition and modernism. He gives himself up to sensations to make the world stop whirling. The only order in the universe is that which he can supply to it, and to reach a stoicism that transcends defeat. And so Fred emerges as a hero in this novel because he breaks from tradition. He breaks from the false abstractions about honor and loyalty and pride and nationalism that led him to the war. And he develops a cynicism in these outward institutions like the army or the church or even school, if you will, as places that will provide a context for him to develop a code. So he develops his own code, and that's how Frederick becomes a Hemingway hero. But the title Farewell to Arms, Ray West takes up and says, look, Fred foolishly thought that the retreat from Caporetto would be noble, that he could dive through the Tagliamento River and have a farewell to arms and to war, and that would end the trap, the biological trap, if you will, that he was in by trying to act nobly and honorably at war. that love would sustain him after the war and against the war. But ultimately, as we know, death prevails. His son dies as a stillborn, and Catherine becomes a lifeless statue like her first lover who died at war, and that was the end of it. He was blown to bits. There's no salvation here in death. And so, when Catherine Barclay signs into the hospital in the form and she writes, I have no religion, that foreshadows that when she dies, and he says it's like saying goodbye to a statue, that there is no afterlife, there is no soul, there is no other life to live for than this life. And so what that does for Hemingway is that, and you see this in many of his characters, is that creates a hyper focus on the actions in this life, the moments in this life that define the self, and that either allow you to develop a code in this world or be a codeless character. And those are the two, really a divide for Hemingway. The characterizes the characters he created in his novels as coded people and codeless people, and I'm sure he did so in his own life. And he finally concludes, he says, you cannot have a farewell to arms by leaving war, for death is dominant and cannot be resisted. And he realizes that deeply when he loses his love of his life and he loses his son at the end of the novel. Very depressing ending, very tragic ending, but I hold on to the belief that Frederick goes on to say he's going to love again, he's going to look for that religious feeling in other loves. Very quickly, synopsis of Robert Penn Warren's famous essay called Hemingway. This is where really the code language comes from. He defines the code hero as one who's destroyed but not defeated on his own terms, that is emotionally destroyed, physically destroyed, or psychologically destroyed, but not ultimately a ruined self. That a hero is one who has won a code made through experiential knowledge. He dies with his self intact, dies with dignity after the self has been destroyed, and reconstructed through adherence to a code that keeps the random consequences at bay. So running orders through chaos becomes really important to these characters because the orders that they create are self-imposed. Being faithful to and love, completing tasks well, speaking through actions, developing and valuing, experiencing all knowledge, valuing solidarity. All of those things become orders by which one conducts oneself in this life so that the chaosness, that the randomness of death can be kept at bay, and when it comes, one does not regret, as Count Greffy becomes a model for us. He doesn't regret any moments of his life because he lived deeply and he lived well. Love takes on a religious feeling, has a religious significance, as a source of salvation if it's perceived as being able to give life meaning. Love creates an order and a meaning to follow and be faithful to the priest and Count Greffy, instruct Fred to make a connection between the abstract devotion, divine love, and human love. And really the presumption here is that if you love another and you sacrifice for another and you give yourself over to another, that will lead to a love of self. And the presumption here, a faith in this life, and maybe even, although hard to make the argument for in Hemingway, maybe even a faith in God. Friendship, solidarity becomes really important. Friend finds salvation in the platonic love of strangers. Rinaldi as one who gets it, who's disillusioned with the war, but he completes his task well as a surgeon. The priest who has faith. The count who's in love. The shopkeeper who helps him. The bartender who saves Fred from being arrested. All of these people, he surrounds himself with coded people who help him get to a place where he can be alone with Catherine. And he tells Catherine, or Catherine tells Fred that you are my religion, so she is clearly deeply in love. And finally, a stoic endurance. Fred realizes that the risk of loving Catherine was so unwilling to take publicly, so afraid to risk and lose, was worth risking. And as he walks back to the hotel, he has no home. In the rain, he's bereft, but not beyond repair, for the reader recalls the code of keeping the random, brutal, destructive forces of immorality, death, war, and despair at bay by the code. And there they are, faithful in love, stoic endurance, valuing experiential knowledge, rejection of war, and completing tasks well as a balm for the scarred soul. So that there's some work there, some help there from the critics to help you write this code and codeless paragraph. Now let's look at the assignment. The writing assignment asks you to choose at least one coded character and develop how he or she exhibits the principles of the code listed above. Choose at least one codeless character and develop how he or she develops the principle of the code listed above. And then in your second paragraph, you're going to compare and contrast, which you can get some help in the writing guide numbers 52 and 53 to show you how to make comparisons between the two moments and how to contrast them. Obviously, there are going to be more differences than there are similarities between a coded moment and a codeless moment. If your honors, I want you to bring in 2 passages from the critical essay from Ray West and from Robert Penn Warren, 1 passage from each, and you can just paraphrase something from this video tutorial. There are the characters. Frederick Henry, Catherine Barclay, the priest, Count Greffy, Dr. Rinaldi, Dr. Valentini, the peasants, the bartender, the Abruzzi citizens. These are the coded characters. Codeless, the sergeants who leave Fred in the stuck car during the retreat, the Italian officers of the firing squad, Ettore, example I gave you, and Dr. Verini, who doesn't believe in his own has not confidence in his own actions, and the Italian officers at the Villa Rosa who don't have faith and love. So I hope this has been helpful in preparing you to develop a quick 3-paragraph here at the max or 2-paragraph writing assignment that will allow you to see the emerging principles of the code in Farewell to Arms, and also definition by negation, those who can't follow a code principle, something that became deeply important to Hemingway's next novel, next most famous novel, For Whom the Bell Tolls, and then again in The Old Man in the Sea. Thanks for listening.